Hey guys, Taki here. I'm super hyped for this one. Today we're going to take a look at the new GPD Win Mini. This is a handheld that I've been looking forward to for a long time. Let's jump right into the unboxing. Inside the package we have the manual, an adapter, a USB Type-C cable, and a 65-watt charger. Right off the bat, I'm kind of impressed by this. This thing feels really premium, so I'm going into this with high expectations. So this is the GPD Win Mini, and this is the first time in a long time that this company has made a smaller device like this. When I started my channel, they were more known for doing devices of this size, but they moved away from that to focus on bigger handhelds like the Win 3, the Win 4, and the Win Max series. It's really cool to see them going back to form with this smaller device, but before we go any further, let's take a look at the specs and the pricing of this device. The Win Mini comes in a few configurations, but I have one of the higher end versions with the Ryzen 7 7840U processor. This unit has 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM running at 7500. This was set to 6400 by default, but I changed it to 7500 in the BIOS. For storage, I have a 2TB SSD with space for additional storage via a micro SD. Our display is kind of the star of this show given our small size. We have a 7-inch 1080p panel with a max refresh rate of 120 Hz. We will check if this is a FreeSync panel later on. Finally, we have a 44 watt-hour battery, which is a lot of power to pack into a device of this size. Now let's talk about the price. There are a lot of SKUs for this thing, but the cheapest one is the 7640U Win Mini, coming in at a target price of $699. We can thank ROG for that one. The next unit up from here swaps over to the 7840U, and it also upgrades the RAM to 32 gigabytes for some reason. That brings our price up much higher to $869. The version up from there is the one that I have, and that one comes with a 2TB SSD. The highest end SKU that they're selling comes in at $1,178 for 64 gigabytes of RAM, a 2TB SSD, and the $30 grip attachments. Kind of pricey for that last one, but the first two aren't that bad, and it wasn't that long ago when a device like this would sell for almost $1,500. The GPD Win Mini is basically a hybrid mini laptop gaming handheld, and it's not the only one of this size. There are other companies that used to make devices like this. We've previously looked at two models from One Netbook, but the big difference between the Win Mini and those devices is the fact that One Netbook units treat gaming as a handheld as almost an afterthought. The One GX1 and the One GX1 Pro only turn into gaming handhelds when you attach controllers to them. Without that, you just kind of have a small laptop, but they do that job very well. This is a product category that I really like, but this processor is really dated from a gaming standpoint at this point. This new one can do everything that this older one can do and better. If we attach the controllers to the GX, we will still have a worse gaming experience than we can get on the Win Mini. Even though this is a device that I've used extensively, the controls on the GX1 are trash in comparison, but it is a decent mini laptop. From where I am now, I would rather have something with integrated controls, even if it means I lose some keyboard space. That's enough of that. Let's start with a quick overview. On the front, we have a spot for a lanyard, and on the left and the right sides, we just have this rubber pad that they've added to make this feel a bit better in the hands. Almost everything is on the back, and there's a lot to like. We have a set of stacked shoulder buttons with good micro switches for R1 and L1. R2 and L2 are analog triggers, and that's a welcome change coming from the older Win 2. Outside of that, we have a few important points depending on what you own. Our first port is an Oculink port followed by a micro SD card slot. We also have a headphone jack on the back, but the toggle switch is the thing that you'll probably be using the most. They usually put this on the sides or on the front, but this one isn't too bad to get to with your finger while you're playing. The final two ports are USB Type-C ports, and one of them is labeled as USB 4, so this is another option for an eGPU setup. That leaves us with our air exhaust, and it's kind of on the smaller side of things given how much power this chip can use. We will have to take a look at how this device handles thermals going forward. The bottom is the only thing that we haven't seen yet, and they've thankfully given us a big area for air intake. GPD is usually good about giving their devices a lot of space for air intake, and this seems decent. I don't know how well it will come across on camera, but they appear to be using a few different types of material for the top, middle, and bottom shells. Each color is different, but the lid is a dark black. No idea if the entire device will be all black when this enters the retail stage, but I wanted to point it out. What we want to do is fully open this device up. One thing that I'm noticing is that they do have a pretty solid set of hinges here. It wasn't uncommon for earlier devices from GPD to have hinges that would break, but this seems to be using a good set like the Win Max. They are tuned a bit tight right now, and if I apply some force to the shell, you can see that it's holding up. If I were to shake this lid, it won't move. I still generally tend to baby the hinges on devices like these, so I would not want to open this up over and over from the side. I tend to try and open it up from the middle, and I'll opt to leave this open instead of closing it if I'm not planning to leave the house with it. That being said, I think the best part about this device is going to be the screen. Some people are going to love that we have fairly small bezels on the left and the right sides. The bottom is a bit larger than the top, so this thing isn't perfectly centered as all things should be, but it's way better than something like the ROG Ally, for example. If you've seen the Win Max series, then these controls will be familiar to you. All of our controls are pretty much the same. We have a set of what I'm assuming are Switch Hall joysticks. These are the ones made by K-Silver, and they are used in products from Anbernic and a few other companies. Our D-pad and ABXY buttons are based on the Vita, and they use dome switches for input. Between those, we have a trackpad, which is nice to see. It's in a perfect spot if you want to try to use it for mouse input while you're holding this in your hands, and it's also big enough to be useful when you're using this on a flat surface. The rest of our controller buttons are right above the keyboard. We have Start and Select, R4 and L4, and a menu button. On the sides of those, we have our speakers. Speakers aren't really loud on this device. I would have liked to see them be a bit louder than they are, but they are good enough if you don't have a pair of headphones around. The rest of this section is dedicated to our keyboard, and this is more than capable of holding up in times where you need to type. I think the keyboard is a bit better than the one that's in the Win 4, and anyone that's ever typed on a BlackBerry will feel right at home with this one. It also has a backlight, but you can't see it in this lighting. Previously on the channel, we looked at the GPD Win Max, and this is the original unit from the launch. They did a few revisions of this unit that I've not filmed, but I have used them, and I still think this concept works well depending on your needs, but I think it works way better on the GPD Win Mini. It's just a lot more practical with the ability to still get a good size screen in a tiny form factor. The Max has a better keyboard, but the controls are pretty much the same, so the bigger size doesn't really do anything for us from a gaming perspective. The Win Mini is basically all of the Win Max, just in a package that I think makes it a more compelling option compared to what we already have on the market. The device that we really want to compare this to is the GPD Win 2, since that was the last small handheld that they've made. They also have a Win 1 that's a little smaller than this, but I don't have it. I am on the lookout for one at a good price, and if I can find one in decent condition, I plan to add it to my collection because I think it looks cool. The Win 2 was the smallest modern-ish PC handheld that you could buy before this, but it's super outdated by today's standards. Given that both units are pretty close together in size, this feels like the proper Win 2 successor that the Win 3 never was. You don't have to look further than both devices side by side to know how big of an upgrade this is. The Win 2 has huge bezels all around the screen, and it looks dated with a round shape around the screen and the bottom half. The Win Mini looks more modern, and everything is better. I still wish someone would remake something smaller like the Win 1 or the Win 2, but this is an awesome compromise if you like smaller clamshells. Based on using this for the last few days or so, I would say this feels like the best version of this kind of device that GPD has ever made. Because this device is so light, I don't have any issues holding it while I'm gaming for a few hours on end. It generally feels comfortable, and those side rails do help slightly. If this wasn't enough for you as it is, they do sell an optional set of grips that make this a bit better to use, and I want to take a look at them since I already have them. They are meant to be screwed in, but you can just put them in place if you don't want to go through that, and they should be good enough if you don't want to go through the hassle. There is a time when you will want to use these grips like this, so I'm going to go through the process of screwing them in to talk about it. After you install the grips, the device is a bit more ergonomic. I don't think I'd bother screwing this in unless I knew I'd use them for a long time, but they do allow you to get more airflow into the unit in situations where you'll be leaving this on a flat surface. I do something else when I want to improve airflow when I want to use this in a dock situation, and we'll talk more about that in just a bit. The grips do add some comfort to the device, but it's important to note that your hands will be pushed down a bit more than you'd probably want. Because of that, I like how the device feels in my hands more without the grips. The grips are valued at $30, and the good thing is that you don't need to buy them if you don't want to. I imagine that we will see a bunch of different grips coming out for this thing since we have easy mounting hole access on the back. GPD customers tend to be people who like to tinker, so I don't think it'll take that long for a third-party option to pop up on Thingiverse. Anyway, I want to take an introductory look at some of the performance metrics on the Mini, and I'm going to apply a slightly different methodology to this. In the past, we could do TDP versus TDP tests between different devices, but a lot of manufacturers are starting to manually adjust their voltage curves to get more power out at a given TDP. This is a somewhat hidden change, but it's not a free one. your device will use more power than if this weren't done, and it makes it almost impossible to do any meaningful apples to apples comparisons between different devices. This is a bogus benchmark, but this is what it would look like if I did not change how I do tests going forward. Based on this chart, device A is much better than device B, and if we look at the 10-watt score, for example, device A is 23% better than B. If you only looked at this chart in isolation, you would think that that's amazing. But in this example, device A has a hidden 1-watt boost across the entire TDP range, and at 10-watt TDP, it would theoretically use the same power as device B when that device is at 11-watt TDP. And you'll see that those values are exactly the same. To be clear, I don't care if companies do this because it's kind of harmless at the end of the day, but I do care if they do this and try to be dishonest by comparing themselves against other competing products. It's really easy to do this, and you will never lose on benchmarks. To my knowledge, none of the companies that are doing voltage changes are trying to do dishonest comparisons, but from this point going forward, I'm going to place a lot more focus on total power consumption when I look at performance metrics because that's one of the only reliable metrics that we have left. Anyway, let's get a baseline of power consumption. On the top, we have Ally, and on the bottom, we have the A1 Pro. If we set both devices to the lowest TDP that they allow, we are at around 4 watts on Ally and around 4.4 watts on the A1 Pro. That TDP gives us just enough power to run the CPU at 544 megahertz, which is the lowest that is possible, and our RAM is also clocked to the lowest that it will go. If we go over to the Win Mini, we can go down to 3.1 TDP, and that gives us all of the same clocks. Both devices have similar size batteries, and they're both at around the same remaining capacity, so the charge drain reading should be comparable since charge drain readings scale with the remaining capacity available. You'll see that the Win Mini is using 7.2 watts of total power at 3.1 watt TDP, and Ally is using 5.5 watts at 4 watt TDP. The Win Mini is brighter than Ally, so let's just give this the best chance for success by turning the screen to the lowest level. The screen goes super dark at the lowest value, which is great, but we need to increase the ISO to get both of these in the same shot. But you should see that even when we're at the minimum brightness level, we are still using more power than Ally. Mini fares better against the deck, and if both devices are set to 3 watt TDP, the deck uses around the same power as Mini, but I think the gap would be in favor of deck using less power if the deck was charged a bit more. I just want to see how this scales up, so I have both of these sitting in a benchmark, and I have it paused right now. At 13 watt TDP, the Win Mini is using just under 22 watts of total power, and the ROG Ally is using just under 19 watts of power. Let's run the test and see what we get. After we do that, Mini beats Ally by 4 points, but again, it uses more power to do that. If we increased Ally's TDP to match Mini's power consumption, Ally would probably tie or beat the Mini. This is until the faster RAM throws it completely to Mini. Even though Mini uses more power than Ally, I don't care. I really like it, and I'd pick it over other handhelds most days of the week. Anyway, let's talk more about TDP, heat, and benchmarks. One thing that I want to point out is that this device came with an 18 watt TDP cap that I had to push up. I don't know what the official limit will be. I changed the TDP in the BIOS to 28 watts for this video, and even that felt kind of extreme. I asked the company what the limit will be, and they said that there will be no limit, so I picked 28 watts randomly. It's important to note that you're not really going to be able to do 28 watts, and you shouldn't really try to do 28 watts on this when you're using it as a handheld. I count that as docked only. If I'm going to play anything over 20 watt TDP, I will use a dock. They don't have a dock that's meant for this, so I've just been using this adaptable RGB one. One reason why I like it is that it gives enough airflow for the air intake, and the air exhaust isn't obstructed. The added benefit is that we can use Mini as a monitor in a pinch because the screen is big enough and it's perfect to use with an external controller. That being said, the fan in here is pretty small, so I don't think you should run over 25 watts unless you add external cooling to the device to help cool it down. Based on my time with the device, I have 4 TDP ranges that I think are perfect for it. Our first is 4 watt TDP, and at that level, we got an overall score of 964 for Time Spy. That's good enough for 2D emulation like Super Nintendo or Game Boy Advance, and it'll get you around 3.5 to 4 hours of battery life at maximum brightness. Up from here, we have 10 watt TDP, and this will get you around 2 hours of battery life. It's the TDP that I tend to use, and if that's not enough, I'll bump up to 12 watt TDP because that's where the fan is still pretty decent. At 10 watt, we got an overall score of 1572. Our next level is 15 watt TDP, and I picked this because it's really the highest that I'd want to use in a handheld setting. I think if you're going to use 15 watt or higher, you're going to want to use those grip attachments because it's going to keep your fingers away from a lot of the heat sources. At this level, we got 2509. And finally, we have 25 watt. I would consider this to be docked mode, and this gives us an overall score of 3003. I usually play Mini at a lower TDP, and so far I have about 20 hours or so on the unit just in gaming. Again, I tend to use a lower TDP when I game on this because the heat isn't an issue at all. If I play a game that needs to be closer to 15 watt TDP, I will be able to feel a lot of heat around the D-pad, ABXY buttons, and trackpad. It's not bad, but it is warm. Anything higher than that, and the whole thing really gets hot to the touch. The top surface is hotter than the sides, but it's not unbearable. I think as long as you go into this understanding that this is a smaller device that you shouldn't be trying to gun the TDP up super high on, then you're going to be just fine. I tend to keep this at around Steam Deck TDP levels. At those levels, it's a great experience. Now, I already have a lot of handhelds with this processor, so I'm not trying to make the Mini my only device. If I pick up Mini for gaming, which I have found myself doing quite a bit outside of working on this video, I do so because the size is smaller and the screen is really good. If I want to extend my battery life as much as possible, I'll probably end up playing some simple games that can run up to 120 FPS at a low TDP like the one that's on screen now. But that's where I'm at with the Mini at this point. We will do more on thermals and everything in another video. I just wanted to touch on that topic here to keep your expectations in line. This is a very small device for the amount of performance that it has. Speaking of the screen, let's go over the good and the bad. As I mentioned, this is a 120Hz panel, but it sadly does not support FreeSync, and that is significant. When I first got this, the only resolution that I had was 1080p. I went in and manually added other ones because this thing really just glitches out when you don't have those other resolutions and things try to use them. I also only had 2 refresh rate options, but I added some other ones. This display can go up to 130 Hz and down to 115 Hz before it can't go any lower. The 60 Hz option doesn't really go up or down, and that's kind of unfortunate. That means we won't be able to do a 40 Hz lock, which would be really beneficial on a device like this unless something changes. Outside of that, this is a really nice panel. Subjectively, I think the screen looks a lot better than the one that's in the ROG Ally. I haven't benchmarked it yet, and I'm not planning to do that in this video, but I think it looks better in several areas. I did find that it was a bit on the warm side, so I tend to go into the Radeon settings and change the color temperature to 7000 Kelvin. That just looks a lot better in my eyes versus the default configuration. But let's wrap up this first look video with some of my general thoughts on the Win Mini. As I mentioned, I've been playing this quite a bit over the last few days, and it's becoming my go-to device for anything that can run well at a low TDP with a high refresh rate. The games just look great on this screen, and I like how compact the entire thing is. I do kind of wish there was a thicker fan in this that could move more air without making a lot of noise, but it's still way better than the old Win 2. I've just been spoiled by how quiet the ROG Ally is, since that's the handheld that I've been using the most lately. I still have a lot of stuff that I want to test on this, and a lot of other stuff that I want to do, including finally getting this thing a valid Windows key. But so far, this thing has impressed me. And based on how I currently feel after using it to make this video, I think this is a device that I would have bought with my own money if I did not have a review unit. Given that I have no shortage of devices to play on, that's the biggest compliment that I can give something. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at my original video on the GPD Win 4. That's another good device from this company. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.